We've reached the international break. NSWE have had to make the hardest decision of their tenure at the Villa, and Dean Smith has been relieved of his duties. There's a lot to get our heads round. So, in the words of Ringo Starr, we need a little bit of help from our friends. So calling on Russell from the Cayman Villans and Dave from the Irish Lions to help me and Baz look into and discuss everything that's been going on at Villa this season really, but most importantly in this first half podcast, the last few days. Ringo Starr, speaking of Scousers,
Thanks for joining us, lads. Much appreciated. I suppose there's only really one place to start, and Dean Smith, he's no longer manager of Villa, and the news comes out on Sunday. Russell, you were at the game on Friday away at Southampton. Did it feel like it was the end with the away fans? Because usually they say in terms of the away fans, you usually have more of the idea of what's going to be coming next. Or did it still come as a shock to you?
No, it didn't feel like the end. I'm annoyed with a couple of newspaper reports that I've read that said the fans didn't kind of applaud Deano back. Certainly, as the players came down to that little away half of where we were in that end of Southampton, all the Villa fans gave them a tremendous. I mean, we were absolutely rubbish in the first half, but the fans, the away fans, who were very vocal throughout, gave them a fantastic reception considering what had happened, in my opinion. So it didn't feel the end. So. Two words about Deano, terribly sad. If you want to ask in a few more words, I'm not renowned for being the most prescient of individuals, but on November the 1st, which was the day after the West Ham match, I'm in touch with one of my mates in Birmingham. He said, what do you think? What are your thoughts, me old mucker? And I said, look, I'm a huge admirer of what Deano's achieved in 3 very short years, from the lower echelons of the Championship to last season's position. But I have to say, I feel his position must be in the balance. A very good performance and a W against Saints buys him a bit of time with international break. But lose, and I actually wrote this, I can see our owners acting decisively. And at that time, on that Monday morning, I said, perhaps we should, money's no object, let's go for Conte. A few hours later, Conte's been appointed manager of Spurs. So that went, but I did comment on, there was a worrying lack of fight from the 11 against West Ham. We seemed better with 10 for a while until about the 75th minute. And what was the flash happiness, the fabled point of your man at Arsenal. But so what? Yeah, 2 words, terribly sad about Deano.
Does that echo your thoughts, Dave? Or do you think it was the right decision at the right time?
I think sad is a good way to describe it. It was interesting. I was messaging you before the Southampton game, and I said that the opinions, I suppose, of the Villa fans here in Ireland had begun to change, and the doubts were very much there. And after the 4 defeats, we very much thought it's Southampton, it's now or never. You know, we got to win this. I think because Dean Smith was a Villa fan and he's Villa through and through, we were all rooting for him. But I mean, I suppose a few people were in where we meet up buskers in town, and then a lot of people watching from their homes. Are still cases have shot up, unfortunately, again in Ireland. But we're all in the messaging groups straight after, and the general consensus on Friday night was that's probably that. So no one was really that surprised here when the news came through on Sunday. But again, we're all kind of disappointed because, as I say, he's a Villa fan and he has delivered as well. Like he's done good. You know, he got us promoted. He got us to a final. He kept us up. He got us mid-table. We beat Liverpool 7-2. You know, so it's sad when you see someone who has actually delivered go, but it's a results business, isn't it? And the owners have invested, and I think I speak for most of the Lions club and the Villa fans over here to say that sad, but we're not surprised. That's just the way football is now.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you, Dave. But the strange thing is, and I know I take the results business, but it's so strange to think we were like 10 minutes away from 3 nice easy points against Wolves, as it were, and also we had that magic moments where we all went out to our back gardens after the Man United match to look for the ball after Bruno Fernandes' penalty, and it's it was that was only a few short weeks ago. And as somebody helpfully put on Twitter today, a graph with a moving average of Villa's position from Deano, 15th or 16th in the Championship, all the way to now. So you're on a sharp dip down in the last 5 games for obvious reasons. But the moving average is always is from the lower echelons of the Championship is always that way. So yeah, I feel I was imagining. Go back to your original question, Baz. I thought he'd be given at least an extra 2 games personally, or wanted that, Brighton and Palace. Here's a question for you, lads. What do you think, if we'd lost against Brighton with Deano in charge, do you think 6 games, do you think the crowd, the whole team would have turned against him at that point?
I think there would have been a bit of an atmosphere, I think, at full time. I think in terms of, we, on the podcast, me and Will, we've probably been on the more sympathetic side about Dean Smith in the course of this season, and echoing comments you've just made there in terms of thinking that he'd probably earned some more time in the bank due to the achievements, and that generally we're in a lot better place now than we were 3 years ago. But it looks if you looked at it in terms of the job that we do, and I know it's not Football Manager what we do, but if you had a bad month and you were sacked after 3 years of doing a good job, you would feel slightly hard done by. But football is such a very unique business now. And you used the word ruthless earlier on, and it is ruthless. I mean, it's a month and you're gone. And Brighton, if there would have been a defeat there, 6 defeats on the bounce, I think losing to Brighton in isolation, I mean, we lost them last year, to be fair, but I think it was more what would be coming around the corner after that. Man City, Leicester. I think 6 could very quickly have turned into 9. And I think that would have been on the crowd's mind in terms of the reaction at full time. So unfortunately, I think it would have been a bad reaction if we would have lost to Brighton. I don't think it would have been deserved. Will, obviously,
I'm lucky enough to get to Brighton. I've been in that position. I would have just cheered him. And I would have. But I say modern reality, I think I said it before, the words loyalty and modern football shouldn't be used in the same sentence. So, yeah.
No. I said I put some words in your mouth there, Will, in terms of sympathy towards Dean Smith. So I'll bring you in now. In terms of the end of the Smith era, summing up your thoughts, too soon or the time had come?
No, I don't think it's too soon, to be honest. Well, I don't. It's a shame that he's got sacked. It very much is, because as Dave's rightly pointed out, and so has Russell, there's been a steady increase in how well we've been doing season on season. We've played very well. He's brought a new culture to Bodymoor Heath. He's sorted out the right mentality at the club, really. But I think it probably was his time to come. It was a bit like when somebody's leaving a job, for example. I'm going to put it to you. You're working with a colleague, they're leaving, and then they do leave, and you think, oh, bloody hell, that's a little bit sad. Really enjoyed having a chat with them and a cup of tea and stuff. You don't realise how much you miss them and how much you appreciated them. And I think that's what's happening a lot with the Villa fans. I think Russ is spot on with what he said about Southampton. The Villa fans obviously didn't turn on him. They didn't turn on him, and it wasn't toxic against West Ham. And that's been said in the papers that it was. It wasn't like that at all. Villa fans clapped him at the end. But unfortunately, I do think it was the right time for him to go, as sad as that is. And he's done a great job for us. You can only be proud of the manager that we did have, proud to have been a Villa fan during that time as well, seeing the upturn in fortunes that we've had, and hope that I think he can come back down to Villa Park in the future with a smile on his face, and with people buying him a pint and saying, thank you for all you did, Deano. I would. There
was a fundraiser put forward from those guys who put the flags, what they called the B6, Project B6. A flag for the whole tent or wherever they can put it for the Brighton match with a thank you, Deano, sort of thing, which would be sweet.
I'd like to just add, I'm actually a little bit happy that he wasn't subjected to the fans turning on him. And I would be a little bit worried if we came back and things went sour against Brighton, if the boos started ringing out, if there was a few Smith out banners. That would have been nasty. That wouldn't have been fair, and that would have soured the whole thing. So in a strange way, I'm happy he's gone now before that started, because it just would have left a bad taste.
You've probably seen his statements issued by the LMA a couple of hours back. It's classy. He's endorsed. It's obviously been written with a bit of legal counsel assistance, to be cynical, but it's his words. He's endorsed it. Brilliant. It's beautiful and classy.
Yeah, definitely. I think Dave as well. You bang on there. It's good that he didn't get subjected to the boos, which if we had have lost to Brighton, no, they would have come. I think, unfortunately, and we spoke about this, didn't we, Baz? We knew that these 4 games from West Ham were big games, and that if things didn't go as well as they should do, really 7 to 9 points, that he probably would be in the firing line. And after those 2 games with the international break, it just seemed the best time to look for a new manager if we were going to. But fortunately as well, no one turned on him, and he leaves with all of our best wishes and with all of us thanking him for what he did, as we've all said before. He's turned our club back around and put us on the road to being a force again. I think, along with our owners, we're being run properly now.
Yeah, I saw a quote from an unidentified source, kind of inside kind of agent, saying that the Villa job is the most desirable job in football at the moment. You certainly wouldn't have been saying that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
When
go back, in the Lerner era. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Oh. So the Dean Smith era is sadly at an end, and so we're on the hunt for a new manager now. Dave, if you had the choice of, well, we've had the similar names kind of put across the media. You don't have to limit yourself to one of those, but in terms of that fine balance between who you'd have and who realistically may want to come, who would be your choice for next Villa manager?
I was thinking about this because you said it earlier, and I thought it's almost easier for me to say who I don't want than who I do want. But without wanting to offend lots of highly paid footballers who probably won't care what I think. I think the best I could hope for would be someone like Paulo Fonseca, if we can get him, if he'd come to Aston Villa, because he's done 2 good jobs at Shakhtar Donetsk and at Roma. I definitely don't want Steven Gerrard. I don't want Thierry Henry or any of these people. I think it's Frank Lampard. I don't know, is he announced at Norwich or is that just a rumour? But I don't want John Terry either. I want someone who's got a bit of a proven track record, and who's done who might just have that little bit of flair to maybe attract players. I mean, there is that question that the Smith out brigade ran, and I never agreed with this, but if there was a different manager, would we have got better players? Would Smith Rowe have been more likely to come? Would Ward-Prowse have come? So the name Fonseca, would that attract maybe kind of a slightly higher class of player from Europe? I don't know. It's always a punt, and the transfer market is tough. But I just think he might be the right type of person to lift us to a level higher than we're at the moment. Make no mistake, this is a tough job because they've got a very hard act to follow. They really do. It's not like we're bottom of the league and we're desperate and the only way is up. We've generally, I think, as Russell pointed out there, we've been on an upward trajectory. So people would expect a lot. So I think it's actually a very tough job for whoever wants to take it on.
Well, especially with the board having demonstrated that they're not going to hang around if things go bad for a month or so. So certainly high pressure. So somebody would need to be able to handle that. Will, any names front running in your mind in terms of who could handle that big job?
I mean, there's a lot of names being bandied about, aren't there? I've seen Mancini bandied about today. Martinez has been heavily linked with a job as well. And, you know, I wouldn't be disappointed with either of those two. They're big names, and those are the sort of names that you want to come in and you want to attract, because it shows that you're on the right road, really. I think along with those Fonseca and Favre as well, the former Dortmund manager, would be two big statement appointments. However, I'm really sorry, Dave. I'm going to have to slightly I've got a different opinion. I'm growing more towards Steven Gerrard as it goes on, and I appreciate Steven Gerrard hasn't really done it in a proper league, if you like, a bit of a farmers league, the Scottish one. But he's wrestled that stranglehold away from Celtic. He's shown that he can bring players through. Aribo, the one from Charlton, who he's got playing well, he's got the best out of Morales as well. And I think he's just a general winner. The other people are as well, who have been suggested. Fonseca, he did a great job at Shakhtar and also at Roma. Braga before then, maybe not so much at Porto, but a lot has gone on since then. I think Gerrard just brings about him a winning mentality. I'd be quite excited to see him as the coach, but I've just put the kiss of death on it by saying that that's who I'd want.
Well, I have one question just to go back at you. Let's say we point Gerrard, and let's say it's going really well in 2 or 3 years. What do you think will happen then?
He's going to Liverpool, yeah.
Bye-bye, Villa. Thanks.
But that's the plus point to me of what Will said. The plus point of Gerrard, who's not my first choice, is that he does well in those 3 years. Villa in an even better place, and then you go the top dollar, the absolute cream of world football, because we've moved up to wherever. We've touched some silverware, top 6 in 3 years.
I think that could happen with anybody, to be honest. Steven Gerrard, obviously, because the Liverpool connections is a very easy tie to make, but it's also a feasible one, and they're probably looking at him at the moment, thinking Klopp's only got a couple of years left. Whoever we bring in, whether it's Potter, if Potter came in and did well, would England be looking for him when Southgate goes? If we brought in Favoured or Fonseca, and a top European team lose their manager and he started to get us onto the brink of Europe or gets us into Europe, even one of the top Premier League teams, do they then start looking at them? We're still a stepping stone at the moment, unfortunately. And until we break into Europe and the Champions League for a few years on the trot, we're probably not going to have a manager who says, do you know what, actually, I'm quite happy here. We're on the only upward curve that we like at the moment, and I'm quite happy staying at the Villa. I think we run that risk with anyone, to be honest with you, but completely take on board what you're saying there. If Liverpool came, they'd probably just have to go hello, and he'd be straight out the door, back up to Kirby, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, my only worry is that is he always going to have one eye on Liverpool? I mean, I'd hate to have a situation where we go to Anfield to get clobbered 3-0 and our manager is going over hugging the Liverpool coaches and that. So
a Hoolier
reservation. I think you make a brilliant point. Well, it could happen with anyone.
Yeah, I'd say personally, my concern about Gerrard is the comparisons that have been made to Brendan Rodgers and what he did at Celtic, because I think there was a similar feeling when Rodgers first went to Leicester that, Celtic, it's, a bit of a nothing league. But Rodgers had experience of managing in England and at a top level at Liverpool. I mean, they didn't quite win the league and it didn't end very well for him at Liverpool, but at least he had that experience. By fear of Gerrard, people are making the same comparison. Gerrard doesn't have that experience of managing in the top flight. And I know you only get it through actually doing it, but I think the lure of kind of saying, it's happened once recently and been successful, we'll do the same again. That's what worries me about Gerrard. I mean, in terms of to set this up nicely for Russell's, to see if it's going to be a deciding vote or not, I'm probably more on Dave's side in terms of Gerrard, to be honest. I see his favourite. I'm not convinced by him, in all honesty. So, Russell, cast the deciding vote in terms of Gerrard. Is it going to be a 3-1 or a 2-2?
Well, first of all, can I give you my one name, the first name that I mentioned as soon as the news came out yesterday? And you haven't mentioned him yet. Somebody earlier today grouped the potential managers in three lovely little headings. Number one was realistic options, in with a shout sort of thing. Number two was an absolute dream, but not realistic. The second group, only three managers in each, or four managers in each group. And the last group was realistic, but a massive risk. The name I picked is in the second one. Yeah, we're dreaming, not really realistic, but I want to dream. I'm a Villa fan. I just want to dream. The name I picked is in that group of three guys in the absolute dream, but not that realistic. Erik ten Hag, what he's done at Ajax in developing youth. If we've got loads of money, a bit like what I said about when I was dreaming about Conte before he moves to Tottenham in my text messages to my Brummie mate. Yeah, I was dreaming, and it was a bit tongue in cheek. And yeah, Erik ten Hag might well be, but on the basis we've got this amount of money, what would it take us to persuade? What sort of contract would it take us to persuade him to leave Ajax? I know they're doing well in the Champions League, blah blah, and carried on, but it's in that, yeah, not really realistic. The other names in that group were Mancini and Simeone, by the way. Gerrard is in that third group of realistic and a massive risk. And as I've read all the news today, yeah, if you want me to, I'm going to plump for, yeah, if we end up there because it's a realistic and we do have to go for that group of players as opposed to the realistic options. The realistic options with a genuine shout of people who are out of work now, Fonseca, Favre, and I would prefer one of those two. But if it gets down to that little grouping, realistic but a risk, I will plump yes, Gerrard, because if he's a success and he goes to Liverpool, Villa have been a success. That's my bottom line.
And Simon Jordan was floating Ten Hag for the job this morning. So I think it was more I think his reasoning, which I think either destroys the argument in a sentence or shows how football works behind closed doors. His reasoning was if Spurs can get Conte, then Villa can get Ten Hag. I'll leave it for the listeners to decide whether that's realistic or a fantasy from Mr. Jordan again. But I'd say for me personally, usually in terms of managerial appointments, they tend to be opposite from the person that came before. You see it. It's usually if somebody's a bit more defensive, they go more attacking, or vice versa. But in terms of kind of going similar and different, obviously Dean Smith came from Brentford. I would be tempted to go back to the Brentford well and go for Thomas Frank.
Good. I don't think we've robbed them so much. I think we should go again.
Yeah, they've got our number already saved in a speed dial at the secretary. I mean, he's kind of, I think, around about 33-1 in the kind of the betting odds, so kind of not really near the top, kind of last I saw. And I can see in terms of more defensive manager Thomas Frank, and in terms of that's the type of managerial choice, which I think sums up the danger of being after Dean Smith, because Dean Smith he tightened up our defence in that season whereby we stayed up. And the start of last season, the defence was very good. But that was because his natural instinct is to be very attacking and needed John Terry alongside him to show him how to tighten it up eventually. Frank is a defensive manager, and usually defensive managers don't get as much time when things begin to go wrong, because if you're stylistic, you get a little more time. But as shown by Dean Smith, not very much. So I think that would be a risk. I think in terms of Ten Hag, I'd agree with you, Russell. If it was a realistic option, I'd drive him from the airport myself to get him signed on there. But I think in terms of it's going to be the decision to sack Smith. It's feel sorry, sympathetic about it. Is it the right decision? That is going to be summed up by who we get next, because there's plenty of clubs who have got rid of a manager because that manager had reached the end of the line and made an absolute hash of who was coming next. And I mentioned Conte at Spurs, and I think an example of a club who the right decision to get rid of a manager, but an absolute hash in the replacement was Spurs when they got rid of Mourinho. I mean, their replacement for Mourinho is already gone in Nuno, because they were just so thought of Mourinho's taking the club down, down the proverbial pan. We need to get rid of him. Just nobody in the club actually had a thought about who was coming next. And I don't think we're talking about the shortlist for the Villa manager. I don't think Nuno was even on the shortlist for the first 2 months, kind of where Spurs were looking. So very important decision for Villa coming in terms of who goes next.
I think you summed it up so well there. This point in the NSWE ownership, this is the biggest decision they will make in any number of years for our development and their ambitions. This is a massive decision for them, and hence my wish that they'd go for a Ten Hag or a Favre. Fonseca I'm not so fond of, but so be it. And Potter to me is a bit of Dean Smith light. I know he's supposed to be a Villa fan, but he played left back for Blues, and he's a great coach, very good coach, but not he's Dean Smith light to me. I don't think that takes us certainly. But what we've got to say is someone to take us into that top half, which Deano may well have done with a bit of better fortune this season, with all the stop starts, the injuries, the international stuff, and bit of a mess.
There's a really good point. I mean, do you think he could have got us to top 10? Had he given the time this season?
Only if we'd had a better start. If we'd taken the 3 points against Wolves, 6 points in all these matches, 6 or 7 points from the matches we've lost. I think he'd then have had the international break. I know there's another international break, and we might lose your man in January to the African Cup of Nations, but and there's then another worldwide international break. But I feel with a bit more good fortune. Perhaps it's just me with my Dean Smith glasses on, and loving him to bits.
Yes, I'd have to agree with you, Russell. And this is a huge decision, but for a decision that's so big, I kind of feel they've probably had a short list, made out before now. I don't think it was just, he's lost 5, let's get rid of him. I think the club is a bit better run, has a bit more foresight.
That message came out loud and clear in a Villa Trust meeting I went to, which was in the January of the season we came up via the playoffs. They had a plan for promotion or non-promotion. If we didn't get promoted, they're probably expecting to lose Jack and probably McGinn at the end of that season. And they had plans, detailed plans that they'd run through. It's not just a little, back of a fag packet. These must be massively thought out, consultation across the whole management, coaching group, etc., and so on. And that's what will have happened as things have panned out in the last couple of months. I'm sure even before the season, what happens if the season goes bad? What do we do? And I'm with you all the way. Villa have thought this through. And go back to the point about someone has made, and to reiterate a good point, Ings wasn't even allowed to tell his father, I think, that he was signing for Aston Villa. So do you think our owners are going to say, here's our shortlist, guys, Ten Hag's on it? But no way they'll make the announcement, hopefully perhaps start of next week at the very latest, but it'll be well thought through and interviewed and consideration all round.
No, I think it was, in terms of a shortlist, has definitely been in the minds for a while, because I think that's to your question, Dave. Do I think Smith could have got us top 10? I think he could have got us top 10, as in, kind of that 10th, 9th, 8th. But I think the decision to get rid of him demonstrates that 9th, 10th, kind of that place at the table isn't acceptable to this current ownership. And I thought at the start of the season, that's roughly where we'd come. And this season would be seen as, kind of the year to get over Jack, and then next season would be the one where we really push. But the owners have different ideas, and I think that is summed up by this decision. I know 5 defeats on the bounce is an easy one to put your hat on it, as it were. We lost 5 games in a row and we're 16th, so relegation. I don't think, and this is coming from somebody who didn't think we'd go down in 2016 at the start of the season, that I don't think we were in danger of going down. I think Smith would have turned it round, but I think it's, as you said, there's a short list in the background already doing the rounds for a little while, and with the international break, and unfortunately the fact that performances haven't been particularly good recently, this was the perfect time to put the fabled Plan B into operation.
I had theory. I'm a bit cynical, but remember ages ago when we were doing okay, there were these reports that a source at Villa Park says that Dean Smith is under pressure. Do you remember that? And we were always going, where on earth is this coming from? Also, over here in Ireland, any time they announced a new set of measures to combat the COVID, the government here would leak it to the media, just to see what the public would think. And if there's anything we'd be absolutely outraged about, all of a sudden that would disappear from their next announcement. So I just wondered, when those stories came out about Dean Smith being in trouble, was that maybe just someone at the club testing the waters, seeing what the fans thought at that early stage?
Quite possibly.
I think that is the modus operandi of our CEO, and many other businesses. So
yeah. Just wondering. No evidence or proof, but I just wondered when I saw the reports. I was just wondering. I wonder. Could this be? Could this have a little more of a motive than just idle gossip?
I think you've got something. I think you've got something there, definitely, because as you say, I think there are a lot of fans on Twitter who were obviously upset with Smith, and you saw a lot of hashtag Smith outs, and it was social media. It wasn't in the ground, because there wasn't the booing, there wasn't the turn, there wasn't the toxicity. It wasn't time for the bed sheets yet at Villa Park, which we're famous for with David O'Leary and that. But because when the truth actually, when it actually happened, there were a lot of Villa fans who were, and there's been a lot more outpouring of positive emotion towards Dean Smith, and people saying he hasn't had enough time, which, you can argue either way, really. But I think you're right there. And I do feel as though there is a mould at Villa Park. I mean, not so much with Danny Ings, as Danny Ings, you mentioned Russell, had to keep that secret from his old man. And a lot of the signings that we've made are very cloak and dagger until pen has pretty much been put to paper. But if you look on Twitter recently, there's been a lot of team selection leaks. I remember before the Brentford game, there were at least 3, because it mentioned that Mings was out. It mentioned that a couple of the other players were out. They actually told us what the team was going to be beforehand. So there's someone doing something there. Maybe for that reason as well.
There was one guy a couple of weeks ago who, I'm not going to mention his Twitter name, but he said tomorrow, the West Ham match, he says Mings is dropped. What's his other one? Ings is injured. He's out injured. And one other. And people picked up and looked back and said, and they called him all the names under the sun. I won't use them on this thing. Because they looked back and said, you said Bailey was starting against Arsenal or something. They picked up and that was his message. So I treated his message with a pinch of salt. As soon as they announced the teams, and I'm in the pub watching it in Cayman with my Cayman pals, I said, look at this guy's tweet from last night, and he had it spot on for the West Ham match. And that's, as you say, that goes back and endorses what you've just said about leaks. Yeah.
Well, we will see whether the next Villa manager gets leaked or not, or whether it will become as a surprise before, as you'd say, you think that it's going to be in action before the Brentford game. Not Brentford, Brighton. How things have gone so quickly since, from Brentford to Brighton.
Second time already, yeah.
Baz has put the whistle to his lips, given it 2 short, sharp blows, and called an end to the first half of this podcast special. Massive thank you to Dave from the Irish Lions and Russell from the Cayman Villans. Without you, you'd have just been listening to me and Baz again. They'll be back for the second half, an exciting one where we discuss the season so far, the job that Deano was allowed to do, our player of the season so far, preferred formations, and much, much more. If you haven't already, give us a follow on Twitter @Talk Trinity. Subscribe to YouTube, download us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, wherever you can get your hands on this podcast. The support, the interactions, the retweets, the likes, the subs, they are all really appreciated and only help us extend our reach. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you for the second half, and until then, cheers, Tar. Thank you very much, and up the Villa.